Welcome back. So we just went over the conceptual planning for making the enemy ships and factions, and now we're actually going to start coding. Alright, and now the first thing I want to do is come over to the game object, because I want to set up the factions. Now, my plan is that all of the faction parents will be declaring what faction they're part of by doing something like this. So we could just put faction equals to a string called ally. But another way we could do it is to just use numbers, and that kind of eliminates the problem of mistyping the string at some point. So we could have 0, for example, to be neutral, 1 could be ally, and 2 could be enemy. But again, that's not very readable for us. We might not remember what number means what. So another way we could do this is to use what's called an enumerator. So we can set up an enumerator called factions, and that could kind of contain all of the factions within it. So we could put neutral, ally, and enemy. So now we've kind of created our own class of variables here with this enumerator. And enumerators are global in scope, which means all of our other objects will be able to access it. It also means that it will come up in the autocomplete. So if I type faction equals factions dot, it will come up here. So that makes it a little bit easier for us to organize it. Great, so that's what we're going to do for the factions. Now, before we go ahead and create the objects, let's just import the sprites for all of our ships. So I have them all here. They should be in the description of the video for you to download, or feel free to create your own. So I'm just going to drag these in. And now, just like with a lot of our sprites, I'm going to set up the origin to be in the middle center, and I'm going to set up their collision masks as well. So for this one, I might actually use an ellipse just so it covers more area of this ship. Just make it feel, it's a little bit in the player's favor, but they won't mind. All right, so I'm going to leave it at that. And for the other one, middle center, this one looks like it can just be a rectangle. All right, so that's fine, something like that. And then the brute. So I'm also going to move this to the middle center. And I think we can just use a diamond for this one. You might be wondering why I have a lot of different sprites for this one. And this is just because I wanted a visual representation for the health that this brute is on. So when it's at full shield, it'll look like this. And then when it's losing its shields, it will end up looking like that. And you might also notice that when you import this into GameMaker, it automatically cut up the image into different frames for me. And that is because I put _strip 5 on it, so 5 for the number of frames. If you do that and import it into GameMaker, it's going to automatically chop it up for you, which is very handy. All right, let's come over to here, and now I'm going to set up all of my objects. So all of the ship objects first. So obj raider, assign the sprite. There. Same for the hunter and the brute. All right, those are all our ships. Now I'm going to set up the enemy parent. So I might call this obj parent enemy. And this one doesn't need a sprite. It's kind of purely there for organizational purposes. There probably won't be an actual instance of this in the game. It's just going to be the parent of objects. So now we can add children under the parent button. So we're going to add the raider, the hunter, and the brute. All right, great. And now our object kind of folder is getting a little bit messy. So I might start to add some organization here as well. I'm going to add a group called enemies, and I'm going to drag in all of the enemies. Cool, and I'll do the same for the allies. Okay, and now let's add the factions. So I'm going to have obj faction enemy. I'm going to have obj faction ally. And I can also add the children for these. So I'm going to add the ship, which is going to be here now. And I should add this one as well. Now, we don't want to be adding the individual enemy ships because that would stuff up what we've already done for their parent. You can only have one parent, but you can have a grandparent. So if we make this one our child, you can see this little drop down shows us its grandchildren, right? So now they will all kind of inherit from each other. This is the grandparent. All right, so that's the allies and the enemies. I also do want a neutral. And I'm going to actually make the asteroids neutral. So I'm going to drag those in. I'm going to add obj faction neutral and have the asteroid as its child. All right, now one final parent object that I'm going to create is just obj faction, and I'm going to have all of the faction objects be children of this one. And this is just so that we don't have to double up on all of our collision events. Basically, all of these objects will be colliding with each other. They're just going to behave differently depending on what faction each other belongs to. But they'll all still collide and probably be destroyed or react in some way. So instead of checking individually for collisions with all of the faction parents, we can just collide with this kind of great grandparent now. So we can add all of these faction grandparents. Great, so now we have a really rigorous hierarchy for all of our objects. All of the factions inherit from the grand faction object, like this. This one has the parent enemy object. We might eventually add some more allies and have perhaps another breakdown of parents in here. And we have the asteroids here. All right, great. Now what I'm going to do is set up some variables in all of these. So in the great-grandparent obj faction object, I'm going to set basically a default faction. We don't necessarily have to do this, but unless I specify otherwise, I'm going to make all of these just start off as neutral. So factions.neutral. All right. Now that I've created this event, all of these objects should inherit this code right here. So all of them will be running this. So let's just check that. So let's head over to the enemy object, the enemy parent faction object, I should say. And you can see right here, there's kind of a ghost event. And this is the inherited event. So you can see this kind of inheritance symbol right here. So there you go. Now we don't actually want the enemy to be in the neutral faction. So we want it to overwrite this. So we can click right here. And this means it's overwritten. So now we can replace it with our own faction. Now the parent enemy object will inherit that, and all of these ship children will inherit the enemy faction. Let's do the same for the ally faction object. So we want to overwrite this and put the ally instead. Great. And the ship will inherit from that. And finally is the asteroids. Okay. Now we don't actually need to overwrite this, so we can keep that just from the parent object, but let's just check in the asteroid object if it inherits. So you can see the ghost event isn't there, and you can see this little cross here, which means it's currently overwriting its parent. And that's because we already had code in here for all the asteroids. We do want it to inherit from its parent, though. We want it to run this code so that it is a neutral object. And the way we can do that is just put up the very top event inherited. So that way, this object can still have its own create event and declare variables that are not from its parent while inheriting whatever its parent is running. So be sure, we're going to have to be careful in the future that if we ever give objects events that override it, we're going to need to put event inherited. All right. So now all of the objects have their factions set up. Now I want to change how the bullet is interacting with the objects. At the moment, it has a very specific collision with the asteroid to do all of this stuff. It is currently going to be unaligned. I don't want it to have an alignment unless it's set. I don't want it to be part of the faction collisions or anything because the bullet has its own special collisions. But that'll make more sense in a second. So for the asteroid object, I actually want to change this to not just be a collision with obj asteroid. I want it to be a collision with obj faction. So with any object that's part of the factions. Now, we are going to have to move this somewhere else. We could just wrap this in, for example, check if the object index is obj asteroid, then do all of this stuff, and then if it's all of the different objects, but that's going to get very messy very quickly. Instead, what I actually want to do is have the objects own all of their own code, basically have them handling what is happening to them when they are hit by a bullet. Do they take damage? Do they explode? Instead of telling them to do a specific thing with a with statement, I'm going to actually tell them to run their own custom events. So I'm going to take all of this, cut it, and let's head over to the asteroid object. So let's go over to the asteroid, and we're going to add this to a custom event. So we're going to head down to other user events, and we can use any of these. Let's just use user event 1. And I'm going to put a event 1 in all of our faction objects, and this is going to be the take damage event. So this event is custom. It doesn't run to a particular trigger, but we can control when it's triggered. And I'm going to just paste all of that code that we had before. So some of this actually belonged to the bullet, I think. So we can get rid of this because we're not in a with statement anymore. We're in the asteroid already. I'm going to highlight all of this. I'm going to shift tab to move it back. So we don't need 2 instance destroys anymore. We can keep the score change and the audio change in here. That's fine. We will be destroying ourselves and we'll be doing all of that. So that's great. Now the asteroids have their own custom take damage event. We're going to have to do the same for the rest. But for now, let's just head back to the bullet. And we have to tell actually the objects to run their take damage event. But actually first we want to check if the object is part of our faction. So we're going to check if the other object, so the object that we're colliding with, if its faction is equal to our faction, then I'm going to exit this event. I don't want to do anything else. I'm not going to damage it. So what we're going to do now is instead of having any specific code for the object, we're going to go with it and just tell it to run. So we're going to tell it to run a particular event. Event performed, by the way, if you want to look this up, just middle click here and we can actually find how to talk about the user event. So down here in EV other, we need to put, and then we need to specify what user event. So heading back, type is EV other, and then the number is EV user 1. All right, and we have forgotten to destroy the bullet. And remember, the bullet will be destroyed regardless of what it's hitting. So we can put that. But if it is hitting an object that's part of its faction, it just won't damage it. All right. Another thing we might want it to check actually is not only if it's hitting an object that's part of its faction, but if it's hitting its creator object. Because I think we were creating the bullet kind of inside the player's collision box. So if we create it right now, it's still going to run this because it will be colliding with the player, which is part of a faction, and it will be destroying itself. And it'll kind of look like we didn't even create it at all. It's not going to be able to pass through the player. So we do need an exception for its creator. So actually, I'm going to just set creator equals, at the moment it's undefined. We might do the same for the faction. At the moment, those two are undefined, but we will be setting these later. If other is equal to the creator, then we also want to just exit. And we don't want to perform this. All right, great. So we've got the bullets collisions all set up. There is actually another thing I wanted to change about the bullets though. At the moment, they're destroying themselves when they go outside of the room. The room's actually quite large now, and I don't really want the bullets to persist in the room if we can't see them, because they might hit an asteroid that's way off and cause a sound effect or cause us to gain points. And that doesn't really seem like a great mechanic to me. The player didn't really do that on purpose. So I'm actually going to delete this. And instead, what we're going to do is be checking if the bullet is still within the camera. And this should be quite easy. So we can just use a if point in rectangle. And remember all of our values for the camera that we set up, all of the global variables. So we can get access to the camera's current X position and Y. So that would be the top left corner of the camera. And then the other two will be global.camera X plus camera width and global.camera Y plus Wibble.camera height. I might put this on a few lines so that we can see it all. There we go. That'll do. So if this is the case, actually we need to check if we're not in the rectangle. So if we're not in the camera, then I want it to just destroy itself. All right, cool. So that's the bullet done. Now, if you remember, in here, we've only really set up user event 1 for the asteroids. Let's set it up for the player as well, so for the ship object. So let's come over to obj ship, and let's set up an event 1. So remember, this is the take damage event. Now, there's a lot of things we could put in here. At the moment, when the player kind of loses health, they just destroy themselves. In the future, we might actually set up health for the player, or we might actually set up an invincible check. So for example, we could check if invincible exit, so it won't take damage. But for now, we can just leave it at that. All right. And I might do the enemies in a second because I've just noticed right here, we have a very specific collision with the asteroid event. But just like the bullets, I want a more general event for when the player collides with a member of a faction. So for both the neutral and the enemy factions, I want it to also run take damage. So we can actually move all of this. I think this is all of its destroy kind of code. So we could put it in here actually, but I might actually put it in its destroy event. So now this will run when the player gets destroyed. Cool, so we're kind of slowly uncoupling code from different events and we're going to be reusing this code a lot. So I can change this to be a collision with the faction. So very similar to the bullet, I want to first check if object is member of our faction. So if other.faction is equal to our faction, then I will exit. But otherwise, I'm gonna run event perform our taking damage event. So great, now we are pointing to the same place as the bullet is going to point to when we take damage. So now we don't have kind of duplicates of code or different ways of handling taking damage. It's all going to point to right here. So we can take in invincibility into account if we're running into an enemy ship, just like how we would take it into account if we were struck by a bullet. All right, great. So that's the player setup as well. All right, now if we actually run the game and test it at this point and try and shoot, say an asteroid, as soon as we shoot, you'll notice that we just explode. And that's because the bullets are still unaligned. They don't have a faction. So we need to change that when the player is shooting a bullet, or in fact, when anyone is shooting a bullet, that we set that bullet to our own faction. And this also might give us an opportunity to set other changes about the bullet. So we might change its speed. So let's just head back to the player object and check out when we were creating the bullet. So you can see right here, when we create the bullet, we set its direction to be equal to our image angle. And I think we had a default speed for the bullet set to 6. We might overwrite this when the bullets get created by the player. So let's head back to the player. I'm actually using Control-T right now just to hop back. And instead of doing all of this, I'm actually going to take all of this, cut it, and instead I'm going to put it into a script. And I'm going to call this create bullet. And I'm going to add all of its properties, so the description can just be create bullet. Now let's think about what arguments we want in here. So we already know, let's just paste what we had from the player, that we want to set a direction for the bullet. So let's put direction. And like I said, it might be cool if we could change what speed the bullet's going. Because I did want, for example, the bullets from the hunters to be a little bit faster, and we might make the bullets from the raider to be a bit slower than the player's bullets. And finally, of course, we need to set its faction. So remember, let's just head back to the player. just to give you an example of the inputs that we might use. So now, this was where we had the code for creating the bullet, and we can just write create bullet. So the direction was the image angle that the player is looking at currently. So that's the angle we'll create it at. The bullet speed, maybe we'll make a variable called bullet speed inside the player and we'll set it to that. So hold on, let's just bullet speed, head over to the create event. Remember, we're inheriting a create event from our parent. So when we overwrite it, we have to be careful to put event inherited, and we'll set bullet speed equal to whatever number you want. I'll put 6. Great, so we're setting it to that. And finally, the faction, we can just pass in our own faction. And this can actually probably be reused in the enemies when they are creating a bullet as well. At the moment, it's complaining just because I haven't actually used these arguments inside the script. So just middle click here to open it up again. And let's finish what we started. All right. So we can actually keep a lot of this. So up the top, let's just change the names of all the arguments that we're receiving. So I'm going to set up dir for argument 0. And remember, we can actually use it as an array or as just argument 0. I'm going to have speed as argument 1 and fac as argument 2. I will have the sound being played. Here, we are going to be creating the object, and now, once we've created the object, we need to change some variables about it. So we're going to go with inst instead, because we're actually going to need a few. So we want to set its direction to be whatever this argument is. We want to set its speed and its faction. And actually, I think the bullet, we can middle click on this right here to go over to the bullet. It wanted to know what its creator was right here, just so that we don't actually collide with our creator. So let's head back to the script. Where is it? Create bullet. Let's also pass over our ID. So whoever is creating the bullet, let's just say creator, and we'll set it to, so whatever's running the script, its ID. That's what the scope of this would be. And remember, it does have to be a temporary variable for us to be able to pass this over. If I wrote creator equals ID in here, this ID, because we're in a with statement, is now referring to the bullet. We want it to refer to the object running this script. So we want to set creator equal to this. All right, so now let's just test that and see if the player is able to shoot. Make sure that the bullet doesn't shoot the actual player and that it will interact with the asteroids. So we can shoot now. Let's go try and shoot an asteroid. Great. And our collision is also working. Great. Okay. So that is the bullet setup. Now, I think when we start to create the enemies, there's actually going to be a lot more objects in the room. And because everything is white currently, we can't really tell who's aligned to what. So I might actually start to color the factions a different color. So I'm going to head back to the faction enemy, and I'm going to make all of the enemy objects set their image blend equal to a color. And I'm going to go with C red. So that just showed a bunch of built-in colors. This means that its sprite is going to be tinted with this color. All right, so in the same way, I want the ally ship to do that as well. So we'll go image blend equals C aqua. You can pick whatever color you want. And I might also make sure the bullets are changing color as well. So we might set if faction equals factions.ally, image blend, and if faction is equal to enemy, image blend equals C red. All right. So now if we run it, the player should be aqua and the asteroid should still be white, but the bullets should be blue as well. All right, so we've set up the backbone of the factions system. In the next tutorial, we're going to be coding in the actual enemy ship's behavior. So I'll see you in the next one.